We lived in a small town a little over an hour from the capital city, connected by a road that was not in the best condition. Most of the journey was on a 2-lane road, and at night it was very dangerous, with many curves and almost no lighting. We had to travel this road frequently, 2 or 3 times a month, since my grandmother lived in the capital, in an old neighborhood where she had lived all her life. She didn't get along well with my mom, so usually only my dad, my sister, or I would go, although sometimes we tried to go all 3 together. We usually tried to return early so that night wouldn't catch us on the way, but on one fateful occasion when we celebrated a birthday with her, we left my grandmother's house after 7 in the evening, with no idea of the horrible experience we were about to have. As usual, as soon as we hit the road leaving the city, I fell asleep. I almost always missed the entire trip until we arrived home and the car stopping woke me up. On that occasion, when it stopped, I opened my eyes expecting to see the lights of my yard around me, but no. What happened? I asked as I sat up. I noticed that my father had gotten out of the car, and I couldn't see anything around us. We had stopped by the roadside in the middle of nowhere in complete darkness. What happened, Karen? I asked again, and my sister took a moment to recover from her shock and respond, someone crossed in front of us. I don't know if we hit him. What do you mean you don't know? I didn't feel anything. You're crazy, I said as I got out of the car to see what kind of madness my sister had involved my dad in this time. I saw my dad's silhouette a few meters behind the car, barely lit by the flashing lights. I walked slowly towards him. When those lights went out, the darkness was absolute. I couldn't see anything. My dad had his back to me and I couldn't see what he was doing. He was just crouched down as if checking something on the ground. Everything okay? I asked in the next second that the flashing light illuminated him. I saw him stand up and I thought he was over 2 meters tall, much more elongated and thin. Evidently what I was seeing wasn't my dad. Alexa, run. My sister shouted from the car and I knew something strange was happening. I ran and saw my dad also running from the opposite side towards the front of the car. We practically threw ourselves into the car at almost the same time and locked the doors. Dad started the car and told us there was something out there. He pointed ahead, but I couldn't stop looking back. The elongated silhouette was lit with each flash, and I don't know if it was me or my imagination, but I saw it getting closer each time. Go, Dad. Let's go. My sister shouted and my dad kept looking ahead, focused. He was pale and completely drenched in sweat. I also looked forward as far as the dim headlights of our car could illuminate. Right at the edge of that light, a figure suddenly crossed the road, emerging from the darkness. A dark, thin figure, walking like a person trying to walk with their back as straight as possible and without moving their arms. Something utterly bizarre. We both screamed. Our screams, my father's and mine, momentarily drowned out my sister's scream. She was shouting, here it is, and pointing to a bush next to her door less than a meter away. When I turned, I could only see the face of what seemed to be an old man emerging from the bush, grinning with a toothless mouth, apparently laughing as he watched my sister terrified. The car tires kicked up a cloud of dust as my dad accelerated hard at that moment. He took the curves at almost full speed. I closed my eyes, hoping not to see anything. Nothing scared us as we were caught off guard, appearing as we rounded the next curve. And there it was, a figure standing on the road between both lanes with its knees bent and hands raised like a scarecrow, but with a horrible old man's face watching us as if laughing at our fear. My dad almost ran it over, but as we passed by, I felt as if it had stolen something from me, like it had taken a piece of my life. We didn't stop until we reached the gas station near my town, where there's almost always a highway patrol car. We ran to speak to the officer, who came out of the store with a coffee and listened to us attentively, without mocking us for a moment. He reported something over the radio. I'm not sure what he meant as he used codes, but I understood from the responses that the other officers were mocking us and him, even bothering to respond with laughter and insults over the radio. Don't worry. I'll keep an eye out, said the officer, but we convinced him not to go alone. Whatever we had just seen was not something he could handle. I remember his figure by the roadside, watching the darkness we had just passed through as we finally entered the town. My dad never wanted to explain what he saw when he left the car, but it was an experience that cost him health problems from which he hasn't yet recovered. After our initial responses, we decided not to talk about what happened that night again. It wasn't until recently that we dared to travel that road at night again, and we haven't seen anything since. Months ago we heard in the news about some guys who used to rob passenger buses in that area, waiting in the dark. They had been brutally beaten, leaving their bodies unrecognizable. My mom, who isn't very cautious and speaks directly, said they were probably the ones who scared us that time, and that they finally got their lesson. But I have a very different theory, and it terrifies me to think that the bodies they found could have been ours. I finish writing my story with fear creeping up my back. My dad and sister went to visit my grandmother and just sent a message saying they're on their way back. It's almost dark,